Welcome to my channel where we look at math problems that students often have a problem with. We will find together that math can be easy. Today we're going to look at intermediate factoring. If you haven't seen my basic factoring video, you might want to look at that first, because I'm going to assume that you already know how to do some basic factoring. So let's look at a little bit more difficult problem than last time. So say we have 2x squared minus 5x minus 3, and we want to factor that. If we wanted to use the techniques we learned in the previous video, well, we could use a double bubble. So we need to find two numbers that multiply to give you 2x squared. Obviously, that's still going to be x and x. But then 2, this is going to be 2 and 1. Those are the only options you have here. So now I look at the 3, right? We need to find two numbers that multiply to give you 3. Well, that's going to be 1 and 3. But one of them is negative, right? Well, we want the two numbers to add to give you negative 5, but it's not quite as simple as earlier because this number complicates everything. If the leading coefficient, that's what we call that. If the leading coefficient isn't 1, it makes this a harder problem. And so generally how we do this is we just guess. We say, okay, let's say plus 3 and minus 1. And then what you have to do is check to see if it's correct. So 2x squared, I'm foiling now, minus 2x plus 3x minus 3. So that's 2x squared plus x minus 3. That's not right. And then you have to go back and do it again. Well, I don't really want to do that because I like another method better. So instead of doing that all the way through, I'm going to use what I call the AC method. So if you look at any quadratic, this is a, b, and c. So a times c is 2 times negative 3, which is negative 6. So I'm going to actually use negative 6 instead of negative 3. And you'll see why here in a little bit. So two numbers that multiply to give you negative 6 are 1 and 6, or 2 and 3. And we use all the concepts we learned in basic factoring because we say, okay, it has to be a negative. This is a negative, so one of them's negative. So we're going to make the bigger number negative to make this negative, so that's going to be this. And then we add them up, and we want them to give you negative 5, so clearly 1 and negative 6 is our solution here. Well, here it's going to differ a little bit, because instead of just writing the double bubble, we're instead going to break up this middle term. We know these two numbers add to give you negative 5, so we can just simply break it up as 1 of them minus 6 of them to get my total of negative 5 of them minus 3. And from here, we just have to factor by grouping, which if you haven't done factoring by grouping yet, don't worry. It's fairly simple. All you have to do is just look at the first two terms. 2x squared plus x. Well, what's common? Just an x, right? And I'm left with 2x plus 1. And then I factor the last two parts. Oops, I don't want a parenthesis there. If there's, generally speaking, if there's a negative here, I would pull it out. So I'm going to pull out a 3 between these two terms. And I'm left with a 2x. And notice I pulled out a negative 3, so this is a plus 1. At this point, you know if you made a mistake, because these two should be the same. If they're not, either you made a mistake, or the original part isn't factorable. And if you're doing the problem, it's probably factorable. And now, since these are the same, we can treat those as their own factor and pull them out. And we're left with x minus 3. So I would say that is a lot easier than guessing and checking because we don't know what to choose right away if there's a lot of options. And there usually are more than a couple options. So let me try one more problem just to really show how useful it is to use this AC method. Let's say we have 6x squared minus x minus 5. If we were to do this using the double bubble method earlier, we'd have a lot of choices. Because how many options are there for 6? And then how many options are there for 5? There's a lot of choices. And it's going to take us a while. But if you use A times C, that's just negative 30. So 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 4 is not possible, and 5 and 6. And, moving along here, because we've all done this before, we know one of them has to be negative, and the bigger one has to be negative to make the overall thing negative. So these are our choices. So now we just see which one adds up to give you negative 1. Clearly, 5 minus 6. And just like before, sorry you can't see this, I'm covering it up. We're going to break up the middle term. This negative 5 became 1 minus 6. Just like this negative 1 is going to become 5 minus 6. We choose the first two terms. Common is just an x. So we're left with 6x plus 5. And over here, all we can pull out is a negative. So we're left with 6x plus 5. Notice we pulled out that negative, changed the sign. And we get 6x plus 5 and x minus 1. I'd say that was actually pretty easy. This problem could have been very difficult, but using AC, it's a lot easier. So, if you like this video, comment, like, and subscribe. If you have a math concept that you're struggling with, comment, and I'll try to include it in a future video. If you're in need of a math tutor, send me an email. My email's in the description. Remember, math can be easy.